running good to the 40, breaks it to the 50, 8 to the 40, 8 to the 30, to the 20, to the 10, to the 5, touchdown.
This is the first One More Down podcast, and this I guess this is really kind of a passion project for myself and Ron Allen. Really, this all kind of started from a project we were doing with Ron Burtis on the Once a Cowboy, Always a Cowboy podcast that was really an opportunity to kind of go back and reflect on the history of Cheney football, his career, his experience, and the feedback and response was really better than I think he or I expected. And it was just an opportunity to really capture some of the history that people don't necessarily know about. And, once some of those individuals who have been around for such a long time are no longer with us, those oral histories, those stories are gone. And so it was really just an opportunity to kind of capture that. And, when we got up to the 1992 season, and even before that, Ron, we were kind of emailing back and forth and on Instagram, Facebook, kind of talking about just different things. You had the opportunity with Kenyon Meadows, Mark Heron, Sylvester Patton to come on the podcast. And then so we kind of formulated a friendship and talking about things through that. And so, here we are. And maybe you could kind of talk about what the vision for this podcast and capturing this history is as we go forward.
Well, I think there's a space for us to speak, about that core football tradition that is within the city of Youngstown. We have a lot of schools that are now defunct in their original forms. South High, Rand High, no longer there. North has been closed since 1980. And then, you have that connection to the parochial schools through Mooney and Ursuline, which the two of you are alums of. But, at one time, those guys were very intertwined within the city series. So when you go back into that history and that tradition, all of those schools, all of those kids, all of those former players, we come all out of the same neighborhood, same mentality. And for that older demographic, which I would put it somewhere between 45 and up, they remember Youngstown City football in a different light than today's young people might remember, or some may not even be aware. So, through our conversations, we realize that we have a common love for the stories and the figures and the major people and names that just continue to live on decade after decade. So our purpose for this podcast is to highlight some of those schools who may not have representation in today's time, to point out great teams that may not have reached the pinnacle of a state championship, but still had great records, great players, great tradition, great history. And then to highlight, featured players that some of us remember hearing about, seeing, playing against, that today's players or those who may be in that 30 and under crowd may not be aware of because of the population loss that's happened over the years in Youngstown. There's a lot of guys that are in positions, may be a figure as a teacher or a principal or a policeman that, the everyday citizen doesn't even know, well, that guy was a great gridiron star prior to his career. So, we're just going to use this as an opportunity to really put a spotlight on what Youngstown football is. And to me, it represents toughness, it represents versatility, it represents perseverance, and it represents excellence. When you turn on college football on a Saturday, a lot of great coaches that hail from this area, a lot of those figures that have made it to the NFL or upper levels of college football, or even those that have transitioned from being local high school players to great high school coaches, administrators, teachers, and just city citizens. We want to look back at those people and put a spotlight on them, give some of those guys their just due and their appreciation, and just let them know that they're not forgotten.
Cool.
And so talking about some of those guys, right, that have been in the city and grown up in the town and played at one of those schools. We have Jeremy Batchelor, and I think it's really kind of appropriate that we have you on, and Ron and I have been talking about who should we get on and how should we start this and what makes sense. And I think it's kind of appropriate with you being that city guy and now being in a very high position of leadership within the city of Youngstown and being the deputy superintendent and of Youngstown City Schools. So we have Jeremy Batchelor kind of starting it off, and maybe Jeremy, you could just kind of touch on your experience coming up and the impact of your youth, and then we'll kind of just start asking questions back and forth and go from there.
Okay. Well, first and foremost, I just glad to be here. Really excited about what you guys are doing. It's fun. It's something that I think we've talked about over the years, Ron and myself and other people, just the importance of football to us as young men and now older men, well into our families and careers, and what it's meant to us. So I want to thank you for providing this platform, number one. So for me, I grew up on the south side of Youngstown, but I grew up in what I consider a solid family, mom, dad, grandparents, everybody around. But I grew up on the south side on Winona, but I spent a lot of my time over in the Warren Avenue area on the south side. And so that's where I kind of found my love for football. I've always been a big kid, so I was always had to play with the older kids. And so it taught me a lot of toughness, kind of getting my head beat in a little bit. And then that's when I decided I wanted to be a part of this, and I wanted to play football, watching guys in my neighborhood go to football practice. I referenced a Scotty Parker, who ended up being a great basketball player at Mooney, but he was the first person that I could touch that I saw walking through my grandmother's yard every day with his red and white Buckeye Oaks uniform with the silver helmet. And I remember, I want to do that. And so I tried to go play when I was 7. And my dad took me up there, and they were like, at that time you had to be 8. They wouldn't let me play. I couldn't get my dad to tell a fib and let me go ahead and play early. But I did end up playing for the Buckeye Oaks for 3-4 years. And then I fell in love with it. I said I was always a big kid, so I always had to try to lose weight to make weight down in the old Vonnie Rogers League. But what that did is it made me play up all the time and play against guys like Ray Merrill, who I still play with, talk to every day, who works in the city. And those guys showed no mercy. But I'm so glad, because it taught me early that this game is not for the faint of heart, but it definitely will turn you into a man. So that's kind of my early upbringing. I don't know how far you want me to go and get into in terms of middle school and high school, but that was my first taste of really knowing what Youngstown football was about. The old Vonnie Rogers League, it's revered amongst us that played in it. A lot of battles. We learned a lot of good lessons and maybe some not so good lessons in some of the things that went on down there, but it made us who we are. And so we were able to navigate in a lot of different arenas and just be tough, be sound. We got, whether people believe it or not, we got great coaching down there. Guys that, probably some of those guys are probably end up on this podcast, some of the coaches that we had, if they're still around, because they invested a lot of time in us, between the Buckeye Elks Warriors and those Sons of Thunder and the Little Penguins, and those types of teams, the Braves. So that's where my start came in. And it obviously went full circle as I got into high school in a different arena. I don't know how much more you want me to go into right now.
Well, you and I, our relationship goes back 40 years at this point, which, that's, for me to even say that, it blows my mind.
Yeah.
But, most people in the city, they may know you in that vein of leadership, having been a principal, having moved up into the central office role that you are in now, where you've worn many hats over the years.
Yeah.
You've been a coach, you've been a player, you've been a probation officer, a manager, and a teacher. And at heart, I think you've always been a teacher. And I think a lot of that springs from that coaching that you got and that influence that those coaches had over you. I've known you as a solid person and a friend all of those years. You've even been my boss at one point. And,
don't tell everybody about that, man.
Well, that's okay. You're also one of those influences on me in terms of formal organized athletics. You were one of the first people in our neighborhood that was going to practice every day, participating in organized teams, and you pulled me into that as well, and kind of sparked my love for just that competition. So, I was fortunate enough to, come up under your willingness to be first, your willingness to set the example. And, I fell in line, and that took me a lot of places.
Okay.
So, I've seen you as a player. I know, how important you are in this realm of education, but I had a front row seat to see how great you were as a competitor and as a warrior, and somebody who has that dichotomy of in between the lines and outside of the lines.
Right.
You've always been a great student, high achiever, and a lot of people in an urban area would consider that as a point of weakness or, a crack in the door where they could take advantage of you. But then there's that other side of Mr. Batchelor, Jeremy Batchelor, Mac, as we may know you around the neighborhood.
Yeah.
There's that warrior and that cut from that steel town, dog in the alley that you just really don't want to see. So, give us an insight into being that frontline position. A lot of people think of linemen as all brawn, no brain.
Yeah. Well,
but for you, what do you think are some of the things that make up a great lineman?
Well, listen, a great lineman, number one, let me say, when I was a kid, obviously, just like everybody else, I wanted to run the ball. I wanted to be the tight end, or I wanted to be a receiver, or whatever. And, so everybody knows I ended up playing at Youngstown, Cardinal, Mooney, and playing for Coach Butchie. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But that if I hadn't done that, I don't know if I would have ever become a great lineman. I might have been okay. But there's just something different about playing left tackle at Cardinal Mooney High School under Don Butchie, okay? And quite honestly, it propelled me to what I do every day. I tell people my first leadership coach obviously was my dad, but my real first leadership coach was Don Butchie, okay? I mean, he showed me how to, number one, work hard, grind, try to pursue perfection. I mean, if you know our old 3-block system, it was all about technique. And so I carry that every day in what I do as a principal, as a teacher, because those preparation sessions And Dallas knows. I mean, in school and education right now, we got a lot coming at us. There's a lot of late nights, a lot of planning, and I draw on those things every day. But for me to be a great lineman is you have to be selfless. But it's like you said though, it's selfless knowing that if you do it well though, the glory will come. Like we never get our names in the paper for the most part. But what I do know about football is that if your line doesn't block, you're not going to score very many points. All right. And so I've kind of taken that mantra throughout my career, even in my position right now. I'm not capable of being a superintendent, yes, but in my situations, I like being that deputy or chief of staff or the, assistant superintendent, which I've been, because I get to be that left tackle all over again. I get to protect my leader and protect all of those that are behind me. And for me right now, that's 4,800 students and about 1,300 staff members. Everything I do every day is removing barriers for those people so that they can do what they need to do. And I just have to say, I love what I do. And I love being in the position that I'm in Youngstown right now. As a Mooney grad, sometimes people are like, well, you're not a Youngstown City guy. Well, yes, I am. I did not go to Youngstown City schools, but I'm telling you, the things that I learned at Mooney, I try to bring and prepare our students with every day to give them the same opportunities. Not saying that they didn't always have, but to try to give them the same opportunities and example that Coach Butchie and all those other folks gave for us to remove barriers to success. Because that's really what it's about. We obviously are still in some struggles in the city, just as a district, as a city. And for me, it's about helping people realize their full potential. And I mentioned earlier that had I went somewhere else, I don't know if I would have ever fallen in love with the offensive line. But I did, because in our program, without it, there wasn't nothing happening. My senior year, we threw the ball 53 times. 53 in a 10-game schedule. And I think when I was a junior, we played 13 games or 12, and we threw maybe 85. So, and Chuck Marlowe, who was our receiver, was the all-time leading receiver in Mooney history until about 2 or 3 years ago. So,
hey, how many times of that was boot pass?
Probably 53 my senior year. That was probably 48.
Right.
So that precision though, and the tenacity that it takes to run the ball that way and be successful. Like me and Justin talk about it all the time. Mr. Jennings is we're gonna run belly until they stop it. We're gonna run even in my work. It's what we do. We do it well. We do it well. So we're gonna run belly until they stop it, and it haven't been stopped yet when I'm running it. So we're gonna keep running it. So when I talked about Coach Butchie, the best story I have in terms of leadership and him giving me that confidence was going into in our senior year. We're about to play Ursuline, and Ursuline ran a 40 defense. So the 3-block system that everybody pretty much knows a lot about is really only used against a 5 front or 50 odd defense. Well, because they had 2 pretty good defensive ends and they played tight that year for whatever reason, he saw something on film and he thought, maybe we need to do something different. And so but he wasn't sure if it would work. So he pulled in myself and Chad McGarry, who was our center, who to me was the best lineman we had, not me. And he pulled us in and drew up on the chalkboard and, with his raspy voice, and he said, can we 3-block this? And I said, what do you mean, Coach? He was like, I'm asking you, can we 3-block this? This is what it's going to require from you two in order for it to make it happen. Well, I'm 17 years old and I'm like, yeah, we can do it. But the point of the story is the fact that playing our biggest rival, he brought us in and asked us what we should do. Now, this man had 4 state championships and the respect of the entire area, but he asked us what we should do against our rival. And from that point forward, that was like, I know that I'm doing something right, and that he just instilled confidence in me after that, that I could lead. if called to do so.
So, it's funny you say that about, Coach Butchie coming in and asking you, because throughout all the people that we've interviewed on the Once a Cowboy podcast, that's been a theme, right? Like, great coaches bring guys in and ask their players,
Absolutely.
and they get their input and they get their feedback. And sometimes people in leadership, they start believing their press clippings a little bit too much. And what is it? Pride comes before the fall, right? And
Absolutely.
so the other thing I was going to ask you was I've known you probably the last 4 or 5 years. We've kind of met and talked and just casually at different places. And it's funny how you're talking about the humility and being in a position of leadership, but it's really, you're serving your people, right? And that's what linemen do, right? You're doing your job, so everybody else is getting shined up and looking good.
Mm-hmm. And again, any accolades that are necessary will come. But that's not what it's even about. It's about the team in every situation. I always say, Ron knows, and he mentioned, I've been around, I've been in North Carolina, and we've had some success. My goal is to make every place better than I left it. I mean, I make it better when I leave it than I found it. And so it's not really about any accolades, but they'll come, and the opportunities will come when you do what you're supposed to do and you leave people better than what you found them. And that for me, that's that servant leadership, that servant heart that is absolutely indicative of an offensive lineman mindset, or even just a football player, period. If you're on a true team and you've had good coaching and you've had good teammates across the years and you've had good friends and family, which I've been blessed to have all. I can't go off of this podcast without using my favorite phrase, and my boys will laugh when they see it. One of my favorite scriptures is Luke chapter 12:48, and it says, "To whom much is given, much is required." We grew up on the south side of Youngstown, so we weren't rich. Okay. I mean, yes, I went to parochial school, but people have no idea what I did to make sure that happened. And my parents, the sacrifices they made to make sure that happened. But we were given so much. We were given, true fatherhood in our lives. We were given everybody in the community wrapping their arms around you, cheering you on. Friendships, brothers. Like I have one sister that's 13 years younger than me, but I had a lot of brothers, and I mean, one of them is on the call with me. We developed a friendship when we were 8. Now, people don't realize this. When we first met each other, we didn't really like each other. We really didn't. He thought I was stealing his best friend. But over the years, we had a bond, and it was football, as he mentioned. It was, our commitment to athletics, our commitment to really, to be honest with you, the history and the love for Youngstown and the love for football. We talk about it all the time, waking up on that Saturday or that Sunday, 2 weeks before Christmas, when the All City or the All Steel Valley pictures used to come out. We talk about that was like that was Christmas for us, waiting to see Jamie Fortune with his arms spread out, or waiting to see, one of the running backs start striking the Heisman pose. That was like a big deal for us, and it was motivation. And that's where our bond kind of came from, is just that love for that. But back to your point of just that servant leadership, again, offensive lineman play, moving barriers. Another one of my favorite phrases is no better pleasure than move a man against his will and he can't do anything about it. And I take that to my work. We're gonna be great in Youngstown, even if people don't want us to be great. Even if the students don't know they're great yet, we're building something that I just believe in, and that comes from football. It absolutely comes from football.
So again, me getting that front row as an offensive lineman, as a left tackle, you don't fit that prototype. You don't fit the 6'2", 6'3", 6'4" guy, long, rangy arms, but the athlete that you were, there were times where you and I would take that run from your front porch, and we run nonstop in preparation for the season, all the way down to the paddle boats past Lake Newport.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I'm not certain what the mileage is on that, but it's got to be at least 4 to 5 easily.
Easy. Easy.
And back in that time, you could do that from start to finish nonstop, get to the end, and not even be breathing heavy. So,
Did you
with
guys
you
play
not,
together? Did you guys
we
play
did not.
together?
No.
No.
Okay.
So
I was a sophomore his junior year, and that was the last time Cheney and Mooney went head to head during our time.
Okay.
I got one play on punt cover, and I think he was on punt return.
he didn't come close to me, Dallas. He didn't. He stayed on the other side of the field.
So you guys were just running together, just getting in shape.
Well,
Just
we grew up in the same neighborhood, so we grew up on the same street, and so we were, like I said earlier, we have a friend in common, Carlton Turner. That once we got into high school, Carlton kind of got into the music and everything. He was doing great things with the Youngstown connection, and he was traveling. And so we were left back in the neighborhood, playing basketball, playing football. Once he got to Cheney and really started, committing to what he was doing, and Coach Burtis had things going over there. I was at Mooney. True story. I was about to leave Mooney to try to come to Cheney. But Coach Butchie and my dad weren't having that. They put the block on it. So, but so we had a dedication. So we would get up every morning and we would run down to the paddle boats and back. Then we'd come back, jump rope. And this was before practice. And you know how Coach Burtis ran practice. And people know how Coach Butchie ran practice. So, and then we would go to the playground and play basketball sometime for a couple hours before we went to practice. So yeah, we spent a lot of time getting ready, even though we weren't on the same team. I wanted him to do well, and he wanted me to do well, as long as we weren't playing against each other. So that was our summer routine, and lifting some weights. Then we go back to my house and cook some food and watching Video Soul on BET or something. So he don't remember that, but we committed to what we wanted to do. Coach Burtis, I'm sure, made a big impact on his life. I know because, before he went to Cheney, we had to work on some things. But Coach Burtis got him right, and then Coach Butchie got me right in terms of just my commitment. And because I wanted to go to Mooney and play basketball, and I actually made the basketball team as a freshman. People probably can't, believe that right now. And I'm definitely not running down to the paddle boats anytime soon. But those times absolutely made us better players at that present moment, and then it also helped us and helps us every day in what we do now, and working with our families and our jobs and those types of things. So that's that.
So and just kind of describing that will and that commitment, that drive that you had, and being on the shorter end for a tackle. How did you use that to your advantage against your opponent?
Well, in terms of using it to my advantage and being a smaller, shorter offensive lineman, especially a tackle, at Mooney, it really wasn't hard because it was all about technique. And quite honestly, it didn't matter whether you were 5'9" or 6'9". If you had good feet and you listened to the coaches and you had good technique, you could be a great lineman. I mentioned Chad McGarry earlier. Chad was a center. And Chad played our senior year. He started off, I remember, at weigh-in at 210. And when we weighed in before the Reagan game our senior year, he was 173 pounds. But in my opinion, he's probably the best center Mooney's ever seen. And so it was about technique. And so back to me, I committed to Coach Butchie always said, if you do it right in practice, in the game, it becomes second nature. And so as a junior, when I first got to start, and we got to play Cleveland West Tech in the opening game. And they were hyping West Tech up. Man, these guys are great athletes, blah, blah, blah. You got to be right. So all week and all during doubles, I'm making sure I'm right. And so we get in the game, and we just start pounding these guys. And we're running belly left, and we're getting – Terrica Jones is getting 6-7 yards a pop. And my steps are right. Dan Murphy, who was our tight end, we're just blowing guys off the ball. And so I saw that what he said was true, that if you put the time in and you have the technique, it didn't really matter who you had in front of you. Quite honestly, I'd rather play against a 6'3", 6'4", God rest his soul, Corey Stringer, than the 5'9" Flowers kid from Canton McKinley, because he was 5'9" and he could move. Well, big 6'5" guys is 330 at the time. I just get up under their shoulder pads and take them where they want to go. So that's how I used it to my advantage. And, you know, that was definitely a heartbreak for me, though. You know, I felt like I was a Division I player. But because of my height as an offensive lineman, that just didn't happen. You know, I got a couple walk-on opportunities, but you mentioned earlier, you know, my dad was always about making sure the grades are right. And so I graduated high school with a 3.8 as well. So it was one of those things where I make a commitment to going and being a walk-on player somewhere that I may or may not be wanted, or I invest in myself for my future. And I will forever be grateful to Coach Butchie again, not only for him as a coach, but he also did something that a lot of coaches, I don't know if they did before, but a lot of them do now. He met with every senior and he would tell you brutally where he thought you could play at. Okay. And so he brought me in and he told me, you could play in the MAC and be a 3-year starter, but you're not going to get a scholarship because all these coaches want, you know, they want the 6'2", 6'3" guy, even though those guys might not be very good, you know, and that's exactly what happened. I was, you know, a lot of interest from pretty much every MAC school, but when it would be time for a scholarship offer, it was, well, we're going to give it to, and I won't say any names, so-and-so who's 6'3", 6'4", who I've been beating to death for the last 2 years. And so it became, so Coach Butchie told me, he said, look, and just we're going to keep it real, right? He said, you're my first Black player that you don't need football. Your grades will take you where you want to go. So if you want to play Division I football and you want to walk on at YSU or wherever, go for it. He said, but if I were you, I would go where my grades took me. So when you decide that you've had enough, you don't have to come home. He said, I've sent guys other places, and because football ended for them, they had to come home. Well, I didn't have to do that. I mean, and I played 2 years up at John Carroll University, decided Division III football just wasn't for me. So I played for 2 years, and then I just focused on my education and started, you know, really focusing on my life after football. I won't lie, it was hard though. Football was a part of who we are forever. For 13 years. And so that following season, when I wasn't suiting up for camp, I didn't know what to do till about November. But obviously we got through it. So I don't know if I answered your question, and probably 3 or 4 more, but you know, you get me talking about football, I'll talk forever.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's you talk about a lot of guys identify as being a football player.
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know, so if you can't play, you go coach, right? Then, right. And then when it's done, what do I do? You know, because like you guys said, from the time of 7, 8 years old, it's so tied to your identity and the performance. And Ron was telling me, you know, you 2-time all SVC player, right?
Yep. Second team my junior year, first team my senior year.
Yep. And that's, you know, so even though you're a humble guy, but that's something that you're proud of, and you know, you appreciate other people's recognition of, you know what, I'm doing a good job. And that's tough, man. It's really a tough transition, and I think a lot of guys get, you know, hit that bump and maybe never kind of recover from it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I, you know, again, I'm thankful for the parents that I had, because they would never allow me, even though football's always going to be a part of who I am. Like right now, I need a hip replacement. And I know that if I hadn't played football for 13 years, I might not. But guess what? I told my wife the other day, I'd do it all over again.
Yeah.
I'd do it all over again. But that's how much I know my life is better and richer. And because my life has been better and richer, the people that I've touched and worked with over the years, his lives are better and richer. And so I know it may sound foolish to people who didn't play football, but I know I'm a better man because I played football. But I also know I'm an even better man because I didn't allow it to. I didn't let the game use me. I used it. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that's, you know, for me as a coach and as an administrator and a principal, that I'm trying to make sure our coaches understand in the city and everywhere I've been, is that we're not going to just use these kids up and keep them eligible long enough to play, and then we're done with them. No, we need to teach them that this is a great game that could open doors for them, or just teach them the lessons that they're going to need to be a great father or husband or coach or teacher themselves, but we don't need to allow them to let the game use them. They need to use the game for what it can do for them. And I'm a strong believer in that. My own son didn't play his whole career. He, got to his senior year, had some difficulty, and then made a decision to step away. But he is doing well, successful in his own right. And I'm proud of him because he didn't allow the game to use him. And that's what I try to tell our students in the city all the time. They go, oh, man, I got to play Friday night. Yeah, I want you to play Friday night, but I want that 1.2 to be up to a 3.2. We're not doing keep you eligible, and then when November 3rd hits and the season's over, you have no prospects, and then because you have no prospects, you shut down. I've seen it happen too many times in my career as a school administrator, as a principal, and even as a principal and administrator. I try to stay involved with our young men to make sure they are thinking about their future and not just the right now. So that's just important. Football has to be a great part of our lives, but it can't be all of our lives to the point where we can't function when it's done. Yes, we're going to miss it. As soon as we're done here, I'm going to watch me some preseason NFL football. I can't wait until Saturday. We're supposed to be out at the park for a Fun in the Yo staff picnic we're going to have, but I'm going to definitely have my iPad set up watching college football. It's who we are. But at the same time, I can't let it detract me from the other things that I know are important in life as well. Friendship, family. But guess what? That's what football is. That's what football is.
Yeah, I'm listening to you, and it's jogging so many memories as you're talking. But the three of us. So I worked as a teacher for 9 years. Put time in some capacity or another for 15 years in education, and then found myself transitioning to local county government. But I listen to you. I've had these short conversations with Dallas, but there's this similarity, even though you and I known each other for 40 years. I've just been able to make a connection with Dallas through the Once a Cowboy, Always a Cowboy podcast. And then you two have met each other in passing through your work. But there's this common thread about the three of us. And I think it has to do with that mentality that makes up Youngstown. So, football is probably that first thing that you get introduced to, when you get out of the preschool type of play. You're playing rough and tumble, or you're getting forced into neighborhood team.
Yeah.
And then, we all got to play, little league, middle school, high school ball. Dallas was a baseball player. You got to play in college. I got to play in college. And then when it's done and over with, we all three of us still have that need and that drive for competition. So we go into coaching, because I think that's the second thing that gets you that close to that feeling of being a player, is to be able to guide somebody and instruct somebody to do that game that you love. So it's almost a selfish pursuit, because we want to influence and bring up that next crop of guys and have them go through those feelings of exhilaration and camaraderie through that sport. But when you really, really are honest with yourself in those quiet moments, you're doing it because you need that competition. You need to be able to control and see an outcome and just be that close to the game. So,
I can't argue with you. I can't argue with you.
Tell us about like your coaching experience, and then how that correlated to your teaching experience and making that move deeper into education.
Okay. So, my coaching experience wasn't very long. I coached middle school football down in North Carolina when I first started teaching, special education teacher down in North Carolina, and I had a middle school team, 7th and 8th grade team that, we took over, and I ran the offense and won 2 straight conference championships. I had a running back that was dynamic, who was also a great basketball player and who's still one of my young mentees to this day, and is doing great things, which is one of my proudest accomplishments as an educator, because I told him when I first met him, I don't care if you make it to the NBA. I want to see you be a great father and a great husband, and one day you're going to be the coach at your alma mater. Well, 3 years ago, he got named as the head coach at his alma mater, and that was like one of my proudest moments because a lot of people thought he wouldn't even go to college. But back to your question. So I coached football, and I went down to North Carolina, which, is different down there. But, I went down there and took the Youngstown flair. We were running stack. I had those 7th and 8th graders running multiple formats. Sets. We ran the stack eye down there. When I first came out in the stack eye, people in the stands were like, "What is he doing?" Now, they run the the old T offense at one of the other schools, but when I got in the stack eye, I changed the name. I called it the Train. So and we ran that, and then we ran some other pro stuff, and we had some success. But then I also got kind of sucked into coaching girls basketball, and I'm telling you, that was probably one of the hardest experiences of my life, but also most rewarding because it probably gave me the patience that I need to end up becoming an administrator, because it was different. And working with young ladies, I had one young lady who was a great basketball player, but her attitude was a problem. Then I had other girls who couldn't walk and chew gum at the same time, but their heart was as big as this room, and they would run through a wall for us. And so they taught me a lot about patience, but even with that, knowing that I had limitations, like I said, football, 2 conference championships, girls basketball, 2 conference championships. I don't like to lose. Failure is not an option. And even you talk about it from a standpoint of moving into teaching and administration, a lot of my experience has been in some school turnaround situations. And quite honestly, my desire for competition fuels me to continue to go back into that work. I was in a comfortable situation over in Austintown as the assistant superintendent, and I chose to go to East High School and be the principal. And my wife thought I was nuts. My kids thought I was nuts. But my drive for competition and some other, things that I stand for, principles, drove me there. And like I said earlier, we've done some things there that people said could never be done, and we're still a work in progress. And even though I'm not the principal at East anymore, my position now gives me the opportunity to impact the entire district and still have my hand on East as well. And it's about, for me, proving people wrong. It's about proving people wrong and proving them that, okay, it's 3rd and 6 and we should probably throw a pass, but we're not. We're going to run belly and get the first down. That's my mentality. I mean, he knows that's my mentality is that, okay, yeah, it's 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7. And, the analytics say you should run boot pass or you should drop back and run play action. But my mindset is run belly. And if I do my job, we're going to get the first down. So that's that. But yes, that selfish competition is part of who we are. We'll never be able to get rid of that.
Yeah, and I think it's always that next challenge you got to beat, right? Administratively, it's like, what problem do I have to solve?
Yeah.
And you can't fail at it.
No.
Whatever it is, right? And you're 100% right, man. It's always that level of I got to beat this thing in front of me.
Mm-hmm. And there's a lot in front of us right now, Dallas.
It always is, man. Yeah. Always is. Yeah. So you were talking, and I wanted to ask you, but you were on a roll. The 3-block system. Is that the belly G? What's the 3-block?
3-block is really 3-block was the blocking system. I can't give away all the secrets now, Dallas. But
they're not running that anymore.
No, they're not. It was unfortunately they're not. I'm gonna get me started on offensive line play right now. But it was just a blocking scheme. That's really what it was. It wasn't. Most folks. You take hat on hat, whoever. It was a blocking scheme, and I'll tell you the premise of it. The premise of it was pretty much create the double team, but then be able to get to the second level.
Yeah, gotcha.
So, and belly and power were like our our bread and butter.
I know.
We had option, but and even veer option and all that. But I think by the time I came along, junior, senior year, we didn't really even run veer option much. But so what 3-block it is that the tackle and the tight end are double teaming the defensive tackle or defensive end who's outside shoulder of the tackle. But your tackle then has to be able to, because your read is coming, or the back, the power, or the belly, where they're coming to run between the tackle and the tight end. So any good linebacker is going to do what? They're going to read the guard who's stepping play side, and they're going to try to fill that hole. Where the guard and the center are double teaming the nose play side. So that front side linebacker is coming free. And so as a tackle, you had to be able to get the double team, create 2 to 3 yards of blowing your man off the ball, and then turn it over to your tight end, and then you be able to pivot on a dime and take care of that linebacker who was flowing, if they flow. If they flowed over the top, then the tight end would come off of the block. And it was like synchronized. If done correctly, it had to be synchronized because you wanted to get that movement on that down lineman. And so the tight end and the tackle's butts had to touch. You get that lineman 2 or 3 yards off the ball, and then that linebacker's flowing. And as a tackle, I just come off. And if I could catch him right up under that shoulder pad right there and take them where they wanted to go, Terica and Bill could just do whatever they wanted to. Coach Butchie's philosophy was the first 3 yards is on the offensive line. And then after that, I can tell whether I have a decent back or not. Because if the lineman's going to get you 3 yards, and that was our job. And then after that, I need Terica Jones and Bill DiOrio and Dwayne Thomas to be able to make it happen after that. So that was the thing, getting that movement off the ball and then being able to come off and get that linebacker. So it was a thing of beauty when done right. That's all I'll say.
Yeah. I mean, it is, I'll tell you what, it's one of those things where, it is a helpless feeling when that other team can come out. And it's a great feeling if you're on the giving end of it. You're getting 3 to 4 yards. It's coming, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. There's nothing you can do.
I'm pretty humble, but we kind of got cocky a little bit when we got into a flow. We would come up to the line of scrimmage. We would tell guys, we're running right here. We're running right here. Yeah. I'm telling you, they'll probably deny it if you ask them, but Gary Sharp that played at Ursuline was a good friend of mine. We went to St. Pat's together, and Gary played like that strong safety. And then Jimmy Bell, who's now my fraternity brother, defensive end, we'll come up to the ball and tell them, Jimmy, Gary, we're running right here. And they'd be like, whatever, Batch, whatever. And I'm like, I'm telling you, we're running right here, and ain't nothing y'all can do about it. That is a great feeling, but it's kind of cocky, but it's a great feeling.
I'm glad you brought some of those names up. So when we say Ursuline, what's that first thing that comes to mind for you?
Well, probably my least humble moment in terms of my claim to fame.
This is what this is about. It's not a time to be humble. This is to put that spotlight and that recognition on who you were and on who you are. You haven't stopped being that person, but this isn't the time for self-deprecation or say what you feel and mean what you say.
So junior year, we played Ursuline the last game of the season at YSU. At that particular time, this is before YSU got on that road, so that was the 1990 season. We packed out the stadium. I mean, we actually set the record for that stadium at that time, the capacity, the most people at a game for that Ursuline game when I was a junior. And we beat them to get a share of the state, the SBC crown that year. We beat them, I think, 13-7 last game of the season. Well, lo and behold, computer rankings come out. Guess who got to play the next week? Ursuline and Mooney, round 1 of the playoffs, Division III playoffs. So we end up playing Ursuline that next week over at Campbell Stadium. And that was a great year for the SBC because all 5 teams were balling. Us in Division III, Fitch and Boardman in Division I. And then it was the year that before Warren Harding joined the SBC, but it was that first year they're combining. So they all knocked each other out in Division I, and Harding on the way to the championship. And then, of course, we knocked out Ursuline that week. We played in the first round. And so what Ron is wanting me to talk about so that game is probably the best game I've ever played in my life. No doubt about it. It absolutely was the best game. I played out of my mind. Everything was flowing. We had 3-blocked that. We had 3-blocked it and kind of worked it out, the system against Ursuline. And so then we came back the next week, and everybody was saying there's no way Mooney can beat them twice in a row. Well, again, we played lights out. We ended up winning, by a touchdown or so and moving on to the playoffs. But WKBN used to do the games on the radio, and then they would give out the jump stretch to the player of the week or whatever. Well, at left tackle, I was the WKBN player of the game, which was unheard of. And really, it's still don't see too many offensive linemen get player of the game, even though I advocate for it all the time. But that was probably one of my proudest moments and best feeling. Of course, I didn't know. My grandmother, who never came to any of my games, but I found out after she passed away that she would listen to them on the radio and record them. But I got to school on Monday morning, and Chuck Marlowe grabbed me and was like, "Man, you were the player of the game. You're the player of the game." I'm like, "Man, whatever, man. You're telling stories." Well, about third period, Coach Butchie called me down to the office, and Jim Campbell was there with a certificate and, telling me so the school get a jump stretch donated to the school. So I got to take the jump stretch home for the first couple of weeks of the summer once we went into the off season. But that was definitely the proudest moment in terms of my high school career, because I think I graded out like 96% that game. And we just, again, whatever we wanted to run, we ran. And it was fun. I'll just say that. It was fun. And again, all those guys are my friends now. My buddy Jimmy, Adam Veazey, Gary Sharp, all those guys, great guys. But we had some battles in the trenches for sure. Jamar Fordham, these guys that, we went to battle and went to war. But again, even those guys, they're doing great things, coaches and fathers and husbands, and that's just what Youngstown football is. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think being on the other side of that game, I know there was, like you said earlier, Ron, right at the start, right between the lines, you do what you do, but there was a common respect,
absolutely.
and there was, a level of camaraderie, right? You want to wax him when you play him, but it's one of those things where, I had a lot of guys that I was friends with and interact with, and still that I see today from Mooney, that are similar to guys that I played with. So it's that iron sharpens iron. That piece there. And I'll tell you what, the first game, we used to have freshman ball boys, right? So you got picked to be a ball boy if you were a freshman, and we were playing Mooney that year. And Coach Angle says, "Hey, you're up." So my freshman year, I got to be a ball boy for that game, and I was on the Mooney side. And I'll tell you what, like I remember thinking, like, this is Catholic school, and Don Butch, you said it, that voice.
Oh yeah.
Like the devil's the head coach over here. He was so intimidating, and his presence and how he was talking to the referees and what was going on in the game. And it was just like, I just thought, for a moment I was like, am I ready to be part of this game? Yeah. How big that moment is. And then it's like, no, if I'm not, I want to be.
Yeah. The Holy War is something special, man. I mean, it really is. I mean, just even the week leading up to it, Dallas,
Yes.
The pranks going on in the schools and those type of things, and the pep rally and then the shillelagh and all that. I mean, it really is something. It's something special. I mean, then you reference Coach Butchie, and I'm telling you, the same feeling you had was the same. I mean, when I first met him, when I was in like 7th or 8th grade, and I went up to Mooney, and I was like, man, I'm gonna talk to this guy. And then when I was a freshman, it was like, okay, And then he walked up to me one time and he called me by name, and I'm like, because he didn't really deal with the freshmen, but when he knew who I was like, okay. So, but I still wouldn't talk to him. And then going into sophomore year, I mentioned to you guys earlier that I was thinking about leaving Mooney and coming to Cheney because tuition wasn't cheap. My parents didn't really have it, but we were in aerobics. We had Kim, I can't remember her last name, used to come do aerobics with us in the summer. We called her Killer Kim. And we'd be in there doing aerobics. And Butch would be in his office, and then he'd come in every now and then. Well, we were doing aerobics one day, and word it got to him that I was thinking about transferring. And he came in to get me from the aerobics, and he pulled me off to the side, and he was like, I don't like what I'm hearing. And so we had a conversation, and he's like, you need to be here. And I'm like, well, why? And he started telling me about, that him and Coach Stoops had conversations, and they felt like I had a bright future, all the right things to say. And then he, talked to me about, making it happen and just staying there. And of course, I ended up doing that. And then even going into my sophomore year, I was the first sophomore to get a red shirt. I didn't end up lettering that year, but, sophomores wore white shirts at practice. And then the upperclassmen wore red shirts. And then if you were a sophomore that was getting some look, then you would get a red shirt. Well, I was the first sophomore in our class to get a red shirt. And so I was like, oh, man, this is cool, And then just after doubles my junior year, though, because doubles my junior year, I couldn't do anything right. He was in my butt. But what I found out was he was trying to see where I was at. And then once I became what I was, and I was probably our most consistent lineman. And so then he started trusting me. We had a drill called 3-block. Well, the system. So we would have 3-block, and 3-block sometimes would last 3 hours. And we would go by side. And so your left side would go up against it, and then he would just keep running. Well, by mid-year, my junior year, left side was done in 15 minutes. Right side be another hour and a half. Because we got so consistent and good at it. And then so his relationship and mine became a little different. Now, I still had a healthy fear of the man, and I wasn't about to just be crazy, but it became more of a, like I said, he would start to trust me, and he would come and ask me questions, which I appreciated. And then the last thing I want to say about Coach is just to this day, while I played really good football for him, the best memories I have with him are actually post-football, because he has shared with me like his pride of who I am as a man more so than who I was as a football player. Whenever he sees me out in public, he makes sure he lets my boys know that, I was a good player for him, but, they got a great dad. And he's told me, every time I see you on TV, I make everybody turn everything off, and I turn it up, and then I record it. And I'm like, that's pretty cool. We were in Sam's Club about 4 years ago, me and my youngest son. And I'm focused on getting my stuff so I can go home and grill. And my son was like, Dad, somebody's trying to talk to you. I'm like, who? And I look around, and it's Coach, and he's coming across the store in almost a sprint to get to me. That meant more to me than any play or any accolades or All-Steel Valley, because we just have this bond now where we can talk as men, but I still respect him as Coach. We call him Coach to this day. And then the greatest honor was also working with him when we were bringing the Steel Valley back. When Shep, we had the idea of bringing the Steel Valley back, even with the 4 teams, we were having meetings once a month, and we rotated them between 2 city schools, Mooney, Ursuline. We were having meetings at the MBR, trying to recruit other schools to come on. Didn't really work out, but we got 4. So the Steel Valley coming back, and it was cool being in the same meeting with him to recharter the SVC. And the history that he had and understood of the Steel Valley Conference and the City Series is unparalleled. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think what's so impressive about it is up until about 70, when Ursuline and Mooney left,
Mm-hmm.
The city was it.
Yeah,
like that was the premier. And you listen to Dick Angle talk about it, Don Butchie, Ron Burtis, all these guys who lived it, like us grew up watching those guys, it was really a premier league.
Yeah,
And then things kind of shifted a little bit when teams leave, but pretty amazing stuff.
absolutely. I mean, I think just the whole premise of what you guys are doing, and just the history and the importance of football, not just because it's football. I mean, you know, when we had a lot of guys that are playing in the NFL, a lot of guys that are coaches and great coaches nationally now. But, you know, guys like us who are, you know, I still consider them regular guys, but hardworking family men, you know, working in our community. It impacts who we are. I mean, when you go other places and you say you're from Youngstown, because I've lived in 2 different states other than Ohio, people know about Youngstown football. They know about some other things about Youngstown too, but they know about Youngstown football and the history that is here and what it's meant in the grit of this valley. And in my personal opinion, our grit is our best asset, but it's also our biggest hindrance too, because we won't let go of the past and let go of the steel mill and all that stuff because they're not coming back. But that mentality that our grandfathers had working in those steel mills, we need to continue to let that live on, but we got to use it in other capacities, in education, medicine, in other industries, the industries that built Youngstown in the 1800s and the early 1900s. Those industries are probably not coming back. And that's one of my frustrations about the area. We got to reinvent ourselves a little bit without losing the work ethic. And guys like, it's like being 45 and up. I mean, we have it. These younger guys, not so much, but they can learn the history from stuff like this, though. Yeah.
It's like the offensive line 3 block, right? It ain't coming back, but you still got that grit with it.
Still got that grit. Absolutely. No, we're not running the 3 block. I know if I was coaching, we would be running. Guess what? I will tell the story, and Jimmy may deny it, but Jimmy reached out a couple of months ago, Jimmy Bell, and he's coaching down at a small school down in Southern Ohio. I think it's called Belfry. And he asked me to send him some footage of the old 3 block system. Now, I didn't send him the Earthling game because I didn't want his players, see some things. But Jimmy, if you're watching or you do watch, I love you, man. But so if I was coaching somewhere and I had, just a bunch of tough guys, which is what we had at Mooney, I still try to sneak it in every now and then. My buddy Mark Asen, who's the coach over at East right now, he tries to line up in it every now and then, but it's not working. It's not working.
It's becoming almost so novel, right? It's that back in the day, it was if you could throw the ball, if you could run option, that was the differentiator, right? If you could line up and stack and just go at somebody, that's a little bit of the differentiator now, and no wonder so many of us have bad hips, knees, shoulders, joints.
Absolutely.
That stuff was barbaric, man.
It was, like I said, some of the drills we did, absolutely. The amount of time and the repetition, my goodness.
I don't even know if you can blame it on what you did in pads. It's probably all them years of rough and tumble and get slammed on
that's a whole nother story
before you even got to pads.
Well, so for me, it's even worse because we had our rough and tumble in the neighborhood, but being an old St. Pat's kid at St. Pat's Elementary on Oak Hill, we didn't have a playground. We just had a parking lot. And as long as we had pizza for lunch, we could ball up a piece of aluminum foil and we played football. And Sister Mary, God rest her soul, she would take the football away from us, but that wasn't going to stop us from playing. And we literally, if you talk to anybody that went to St. Pat's, we played tackle football on the cement. Now, we had to wear those green pants to work to school every day. And so we got a lot of stern talking tos from our mothers from going home with those green pants all tore up and scuffed up in the knees because we played tackle football on the cement. And Sister Mary would get so mad at us, but a lot of those guys were my teammates at Mooney. I remember getting knocked over the guardrail by Ramona Mill and all those times, man. It's just it was barbaric, as you said, but we're still here. We're still here.
I remember we used to play. I went to Madison Elementary on the north side, right down there by Ursuline, and we used to play we'd play rough and tumble. We couldn't tackle, so I mean, I was always a big guy. I was always a lineman. So I'm watching guys trying to emulate Eric Metcalf at the time. And it was amazing. I was a little out of my element. I need to have my hand on the ground, start blocking people.
Absolutely. Oh man.
I did have one question, and Ron, you can wrap it up. So, and I was thinking about this today, and I don't know if I can verbalize it the way I feel it, but I remember. So I went to Youngstown City, okay, and I coached at Cheney, and I'm teaching in the city. So when I first got my teaching job, I'm teaching it at West. I'm coaching at Cheney, and I vividly remember, we're going to play Poland, and I swear to God, Gary, he was my bus driver when I was a kindergartner.
Wow.
And he drove us to the game, and I remember thinking, like, is this him? So we end up after the game, I'm on the bus. We end up winning the game, coming back. And I really remember him because he gave me $5 at the end of the year because I went from the worst kid on the bus to the best kid on the bus because I got rode up. I got in trouble. No, but seriously, you think about that. As a kindergartner, 18, 20 years later, he made an impact on me. And the bus driver. So I was talking to him and I said, hey, I don't know if you remember me or not, but, I tell him the story and he's like, no, I do. And he's like, I'm glad you said that. And so it got me thinking about to you.
Okay.
So, here you are, you're a Youngstown guy, you grew up on the South Side. And, I was thinking, like, I'm that person now. I'm the guy that made an impact, on my life from some insignificant little interaction.
Right.
And now you have that opportunity. What does that mean to you?
I mean, it may sound kind of cliche, but it means everything to me. I mean, because I've had, just like you, Dallas, I had those experiences with people who sold into our lives. And I know Ron as well, whether it was Ronnie Burley, who coached me as a little kid, and then I ran into him at East about 3 or 4 years ago. I mean, we had so many positive influences in our lives. And so for me to be able to be that for someone else, that's what it's all about. I mean, number one was starting with my own family, my kids, my daughter and my 2 sons. I try to treat every student that I meet as if they were my own. And that's like my mantra. And sometimes people get mad at me because they'll say, well, these aren't my kids. Well, I tell people as teachers, if you don't want to treat these kids like they're your own, you don't really need to be here. So that for me it means a lot, Dallas, because my first year teaching, I just turned 23. In fact, I wasn't even 23 until the first week of school was over. And so for those students that I met, then they're 37 and 38 years old right now. And I wasn't much older than them, but some of my most connections that I have are those students that I had when they were in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade 30 years ago, 25 years ago now. So you never know what impact you're going to have on somebody. That bus driver didn't know that had that impact that you would remember that 20 years later. And so you should approach every day as if you want to give an opportunity to somebody to better, like I said earlier, leave every situation better than what you found it. And so I take pride on that, and that every student that I try to come across, that I try to impart some level of wisdom into them. But I also selfishly, I learn from them. And that's the part that I think as adults, we forget that we can learn from our students, and we need to learn from our students in order for us to stay relevant, to be able to do what we do every day. So, I mean, I could go on and on, but that's what it means. That's what it's about, is reaching back and helping others, even when you don't know you're helping someone, holding that door for the old lady at the store. I know that sometimes maybe kids aren't doing that anymore, but my boys still do that because that was instilled in me. And guess what? That old lady or that lady, her daughter may be the person interviewing you for a job next week. And sometimes, or you may need something and you run into her or her husband later on. It's just about being a good person. And I think and I'll leave it with this, that the world we need to be a little kinder to each other. I think back in the day, we were a lot more kind to each other. We were a lot more integrated and willing to help people. And we've gotten a little selfish. And I think people like yourself and us doing what we do every day, and those bus drivers, and we have some great staff in Youngstown that are still doing those types of things. If we just got to be a light in the world, man. Just got to be a light in the world.
So if you see Gary down at the bus garage, tell him I said thank you again.
All right. All right.
I think it's appropriate and fitting that we would start our first episode off with a lineman, because, like you said earlier, you can't win a game without that front seven. Offensively and defensively, that's where the games are won and lost. I think it's just always who you have been and who you were meant to be, is a person that clears a path to make it easier for someone else to get through and be successful. And, it just fits everything that you gravitate to. It really says a lot about who you are, about being willing to put yourself on the front line where the most contact and conflict is going to happen, so somebody can have a smooth ride, get the glory and accolades and attention. But when you really look at it and think about it, those that really know and pay attention, they know where the tone is set. So in your personal life, in your academic life, in your athletic life and internal life, you've always been that guy that clears that path, sets the table, and puts yourself out front so those yards can be gained. So in saying that, if you had one more down,
oh boy, oh boy,
where would it be, and what would you do with it?
Well, if I had one more down, I mean, one of my biggest, heartbreak still is when I go to the Hall of Fame Stadium. I still get little tremors when I ride by the Hall of Fame Stadium. We played in the 1990 state semifinal game, a game away from the state championship, and we lost 31-21 to Richfield Revere. 32 years later, I can tell you what score it was. I can tell you what part of the field I was when the final clock ended and everything. So if I had one more down, number one, I hopefully we would start that game a little differently. That was the craziest game before we even left Youngstown. Two of our senior best players got in a car accident, so a little rattled. When we got there, we just did not play well the first quarter or so. But if I had one more down, I would love for us to have the ball on the 1 yard line and we have the ball on the 10-yard line and be within scoring distance of that game to be able to punch it in and punch our ticket to the state championship game. I would like to have the opportunity to run belly and put us in the end zone to win that game, because I do know and believe that if we would have made it to the state championship game, that we would have won that state championship game. I think I put in the information that you asked me for. I went to college and played with a couple of guys from Hamilton-Baton who ended up winning the Division III state championship game that year. They told us, because there was like three of us that went from Mooney to John Carroll that year, myself, Mark Asen, and Frank Colapre, and they told us that they had been practicing for us for 3 weeks because they just knew we were coming out of this region to play, and they were confident that they were going to win their region, and they just knew that we were going to end up meeting them in the state championship game. So I just know that if we'd have got the ball and had the opportunity to score, could have put that thing over, and then we would have went on and got a little jewelry that I would be getting made fun of for still wearing to the day.
It's been good talking with you, man. Educational leader, two-time All-SVC, Mooney Hall of Famer. You're just a great person, man, and a really good friend to have. I appreciate you, your time out to, speak with us and kick this thing off, and hopefully it'll get better as it goes.
I'm honored to be the first. I definitely didn't think I should be the first person you talk to, but I appreciate the opportunity, and I'm honored. And you already know. You already know what it is with us. And Dallas has been a great person I met about 5 years ago when I came back to the area. We used to meet up on the trail, talk on the trail, walking in the neighborhood here, and then him and a good friend of mine, Mario, they live in the same neighborhood. So great young man. I didn't realize that he was a Youngstown guy until I started talking to him at some ESC meetings. Dallas is solid, and so I just love what you guys are doing, and I'm thankful for the platform. Thank you guys. All right.
Yeah, man. Thank you. So, really appreciate it.
All right.